Have you been shocked by what you've seen with journalists being arrested, beaten, and violently attacked? One of the earliest instances we saw was CNN reporter Omar Ramirez being arrested on live television with his entire crew. He was so shocked that he could barely believe what was happening.
Absolutely. I think following Omar's arrest over the weekend, there were several different protests and uprisings happening across the country. And as those protests were happening, there was also a continuing barrage of arrests and assaults on journalists, and it was shocking. You saw police shooting directly at journalists with wooden pellets and rubber bullets. You saw people getting arrested. You saw journalists being pushed into buildings or being shoved into doors and told not to come out. And it was shocking. I think that was the first response was, what's happening? Why is this happening? And then if you take a pause, then the next piece was, of course, this is happening. Because if police are violating the First Amendment, which they are doing when they suppress protesting, then of course they're going to be violating the First Amendment when they are targeting journalists. So it was both a shock and then also yes, this makes sense.
Right. I mean, it's sort of a rule of thumb in even, say, war zones on a global level that when you have a journalist who's, clearly marked, they might be wearing a brightly colored vest or, carrying a giant camera, wearing a identification badge on their person, that they're there as observers, as witnesses to document what's happening factually as it is happening, and that generally those that are battling one another leave the journalists alone to do their jobs, unless, of course, they specifically target them for doing their jobs. Here in the United States, we're seeing, perhaps for the first time in a long time, what seems to be a clear trend. I think what's disturbing is that it's not just one department or another, from Minneapolis to Los Angeles to New York to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Police are targeting and attacking journalists. And I mean, obviously, there's no necessarily national, police chief on high sending memos to police departments. But do you think this is a tacit understanding among police departments that journalism is part of the problem?
Well, there may not be a police chief on high that is ordering this assault on journalists, but I certainly think that when you look at the different things that Donald Trump has been saying and calling the press the enemy of the people, talking about fake news